This segment is brought to you by JigMasters Jigs. When in doubt, get the jig out. Go to JigMasters.com and use promo code PNF20 and save 20% off your next jig order today.
Welcome everybody back to the Paddle and Fin Network. This is the final cast. I'm your host Josh, and I've got Brian Schiller with me tonight. Brian, how's it going, buddy?
Good. Yourself, man?
I'm doing well. Doing good, man. It's a long day at work, especially after the full past couple weekends of doing the boat show. But, it's good to jump on and do another pod. I did one last night. And so, Jeff, we have Jeff Little of Torqeedo with us tonight. Jeff, how are you doing?
Doing well.
Good. I contacted Jeff, I think it was Thursday or Friday. It's like, Jeff, are you interested in coming on, man, and doing an interview? And he was like, sure, let me check. And he's like, how's about Monday? And I'm like, yeah, that works for me, man. So, but we're really happy to have you on. Sorry, Brian, go ahead. I've already cut
No. I was just going to say, yeah, absolutely. Jeff's somebody that I've always wanted to talk to. The Torqeedo is a very interesting tool in the kayak fishing world for sure. And I'm super interested in being able to pick his brain a little bit on Torqeedo tonight and see where the conversation takes us, man.
Cool. Ultimately, it's a tool that leads you to more of your time with your line in the water, whether you're getting to your spots quicker, whether you're river fishing and running upstream with it and then floating down. You don't have all that time wrapped up in doing a float trip, or if you're trolling. I mean, my background is a lot of river smallmouth fishing, but some tidal largemouth in and around DC. And then we have the Chesapeake Bay, so I've done a lot of striped bass fishing. So
nice.
A lot of different applications there. I mean, where you're using it to hold in place because of the current. I've actually, I can't say I've won a bunch of tournaments using it, because the tournaments I've done have all been river bassing and they didn't allow them.
Okay.
But I love fishing the Susquehanna River.
Nice.
When that river gets up and really gets cranking, there's nothing like, getting at the base of a class 3 rapid and just letting the motor hold you within easy casting distance of just chucking square bills into whitewater.
Nice.
That pulls out a lot of big smallmouth. So
I've heard nothing but great things about the Susquehanna. I've always wanted to fish that. It's just like phenomenal for smallmouth.
Its biomass is always impressive, and it has changed over the years. If you go back to early 2000s, I remember you could go up there and you can get 30 or 40 of them that were 16 inches or better, but it would be rare to break 19 inches. And then it shifted where we had some poor spawns and big gaps in year classes. And what it led to was not a lot of fish, but the ones that were there were old giants. And I'd say it peaked for big fish, where all that biomass was stacked into 2 or 3 year classes of big dominant fish. It really, I'd say it peaked, and I don't want to say the best of it's behind it, but it was really good 4 or 5 years ago. And that's when Jed Plunkett and I won back-to-back river bass and tournaments up there. And the two of us as a team set the record for the team total for river bass in all time. That's going up against all the rivers, all this big spotted bass and the largemouth down south. We did that with brownfish in Pennsylvania. So it was 123 3/4 inches on 6 fish.
Wow.
And one of those was a 6-pound, 10-ounce giant that actually wasn't the longest, but it was the heaviest. And it was, thankfully it was my personal best. heaviest that I've ever caught, and I did it during a tournament. But that river, you know, it's funny. I grew up north and west of DC, so I grew up riding my bike about a 8 mile, you know, bike ride to Swains Lock on the Upper Potomac. So I grew up fishing the Potomac, and you know, after college, we lived closer to the Potomac, and now we're sort of equidistant, but splitting between the two, I can, you know, in an hour and 10 minutes, I can be in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania on the Susquehanna, and an hour and 15, I can be at Point of Rocks. And I never touched the Potomac because the Susquehanna is that much better.
Yeah.
And I can't explain it, but it's just got a really impressive forage base. A lot of crayfish, a lot of mad toms and hellgrammites and sculpin, and you know, it's just teeming with life. Like, you get to certain areas where you look down at the bottom of the river in certain places, and you get dizzy because the entire bottom of the river is just moving. Like, everything is in ocean. It's just crayfish everywhere. So,
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, locally we just had hellgrammites kind of make a comeback. It was pretty much, they were wiped out in the kind of southwest Ohio area. I'm not familiar with how it was in other places, but it took a really, really steep decline. And then the local, like, conservancy district, especially around the Little Miami, which you got to fish when you came to Loveland,
Yep.
when they started buying up a lot of the land and replanting trees and buying the land that kind of helped keep the trees from being torn down, that sort of thing, they started to make a nice, real solid comeback from Caesars Creek down. And it's kind of cool seeing, you know, things like that happen and seeing everything kind of bounce back. They started removing a lot of the low-head dams in the Dayton and Cincinnati area, like between the river systems between there. And it's helping a lot. You know, a lot of people kind of complain because they had areas that were like rocky areas that they fished are kind of now muddy, but it's good because it's not silting up like one spot. It's kind of evening everything out instead of only having like one or two good spots. It's actually starting to spread it out, and you're starting to see some big fish in areas that were just trashed, like, you know, like industrial wise, like the pollution was so bad, and you know, the fishing in the river was so bad that just, you know, people kind of stopped doing it, you know, besides the places that, you know, at the low head dams, and eventually that just caused all the population decline from everybody pulling fish out. But I have a big dream to come out to your river, man, and fish. We've got a buddy of ours, Eric Richards, who lives out by there, and we're always like, Eric, when are you going to invite us out, buddy?
Yeah.
Right.
That's awesome.
I've actually fished a little bit here and there in your part of the world. I can't even tell you how many years ago, but I was a guest speaker for the Buckeye United Fly Fishers.
Yeah, that's coming up next weekend.
Yeah, I was one of their speakers. I guess someone there found either the book that I wrote, or back in the River Smallies days, I was following the articles I was putting in there, but they had me come out and talk, and I fished. I said, I'm coming out, but I got to fish. I got to catch an Ohio smallmouth, you know?
Yeah.
Nice.
So I drove out from Maryland, and I think somebody put me on that stretch on Caesars from the dam down. And, I mean, it was late November, and I caught a couple smallmouth, but I fished there, and I fished, I went and I filmed with Kurt Smits, I think the summer after he won the national championship, and kind of documented the rig and the technique, and you know how he won that national championship. So
nice, very cool.
Well, you care to give us like a brief history of Torqeedo?
The history is that two German guys that like to go boating on Lake Starnberg, which is an electric only lake. I don't know, 15, 16 years ago, They're actually they were product engineers for Gardenia. So like spray nozzles and gardening supplies, that company, that's who they worked for. And, but they spent their weekends on Lake Starnberg, and they looked at the electric propulsion options and said, it's not good enough. We can come up with something better. And they were two smart dudes, and they did. And everyone it kind of turns everyone's heads when they see, a boat scooting by at a clip a lot faster than anyone had seen. And, people tracked it down. It was like, where'd you get it? Well, we made it. Well, would you make another? And then another and another. And then they're like, we got to quit our jobs with Gardenia and start, as it were, Torqeedo. Which Torqeedo is a play on words with torque. It is a high torque motor, and the design that they came up with. I'm doing this this Skype call chat with a laptop here, and I can hear the little fan blowing to keep it from overheating. Whether it's that electric motor for the fan or a Minn Kota trolling motor or any other electric motor, the basic design is that you have your copper coils, you have a magnet that goes in the middle, you apply electricity, and that magnet and anything that's fixed to it spins. That could be a fan blade, a propeller, an actuator, whatever it is. When they invented the Torqeedo motor, they inverted that relationship. Instead of putting the magnet in the middle, they put a bell housing around the outside, and the bell housing had magnets all the way around. So there was more magnets in use. There's a more magnets, more of that interface with the copper coil, and so more magnets is more torque. But the magnets they use were not the ferrite magnets you see in a regular trolling motor. They're rare earth magnets, which are crazy expensive.
Okay.
But they're also 6 times more powerful per weight. So another magnification of torque. On top of that, more magnets, they're more powerful magnets. And that just creates a tremendous amount of torque. What you do with the torque is you express it in a propeller blade that doesn't have a moderate pitch. You have one that has a really aggressive pitch. So every turn of that, every rotation, it's taking big bites of water and putting it behind it. And that's why, when you're out there, and I've been out in the middle of the Chesapeake Bay with buddies, and, we're catching, we had been on stripers and catching them, and we turn around and here comes a storm, and I'm like, we got to get out of here. And I know that they're going to paddle at about, maybe in a sprint, they would touch 5 mile an hour, but they're going to maintain about 4 mile an hour. And I can get out of there at 5.7 mile per hour with my setup. But I'd look at them and say, all right, Jed, all right, Bear. And this is before they got motored up themselves. I'd get one on either side, and I'd grab the bow of each of them and say, we're gonna get out of here together quickly. And it would go from 5.7 down to about 4.9. So you're not losing a tremendous amount of speed,
Wow.
even though you've tripled your weight.
Yeah.
And you only do that with a high torque motor. Its ability to push a lot of weight and maintain speed is what sets it apart. It's actually a low RPM motor compared to gas motors or trolling motors. Trolling motors spin fast and they take lots of tiny bites, whereas the Torqeedo, I don't want to say it's just a lower RPM, but like I said, taking big bites of water and putting it behind it.
That's interesting. So is like you mentioned, those magnets are super expensive. So is that like a good chunk of the cost when you're buying a Torqeedo, so to speak? I know, your
That's
battery and electronic setup is, something.
Lithium batteries. Lithium, the lithium cells themselves get better energy density each year, and you could say they get less expensive, but it's more about, how much energy you can put in a certain amount of space that a cell takes up.
Sure.
It's got other things like there's a GPS unit in the battery that tells you your speed on the throttle, which is interesting.
Yeah.
But you could get that with your, with your depth finder. Why do you need to know your speed on your motor? There's other ways to do that. The reason it's in there is that it's one of the 3 pieces of data that the brains of the Torqeedo uses to calculate your remaining range at whatever throttle setting you have it at. That's critical. With a trolling motor, it's sort of like driving a car with a busted gas gauge. You don't know how long it's going to last.
Yeah.
You get a sense of it. You think, yeah, it's been 3 days since I topped it off, but my gas gauge is busted. I don't really know when this is going to die.
Sure.
With the Torqeedo, it's sort of like the newer cars that have the thing, the readout that says you have 283.4 miles until empty. Right?
Yeah.
It takes your speed with the GPS, the remaining battery percentage, and the watt draw. So basically, how much power is coming out of the battery to make it go whatever speed you're going, and it calculates to the 1/10 of a mile how much remaining range. So, say for instance, and I like using the example of running offshore. I know you guys don't do a lot of offshore fishing, and although you might, I mean, Great Lakes, right? Say you're out on Erie, and you run 4 miles out to a reef on Erie, right? And you've used up the battery going back and forth to the point where you have, say, 40% of your battery remaining, and you think, okay, I got time to get back to the weigh-in. How much, for the distance I have to make that, or the time I have to do that 4 miles, am I going to make it in time? And I want to go as fast as I possibly can and stay out there as long as I possibly can. So say you're mashing it and it says you only have 3.8 miles of range and you have 4 miles to go at full speed, 5.7 miles per hour. You back it off to like 5.6, 5.5 instead of going full speed. You just take a hair off and you can see that remaining range number grow up over 4.
Nice.
Interesting.
So it really gives you a very specific remaining range, which is another way that it gives you more time with your line in the water. That is, it's just more fishing time.
Yeah.
Another way that I've quantified it, though, and this was a fun video I did years ago on the river, is I had a power pole and I stuck the camera up on it and I just filmed myself fishing without the motor. I think I did, 10 minutes of fishing, and I just let it run and I set a timer and then I stopped and I recorded it again. Then I used the motor and I put that nose up into the whitewater and just started, chucking crankbaits and whatever. And I actually caught fish during the second one. I didn't in the first, but the point is I was looking at how many more casts you get by not going paddle, 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 cast, and backsliding as you're reeling it in. You just go cast, 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 cast instead of paddle, 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 cast, paddle, 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 cast. You go cast, 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 fish on. Like it just it does translate to you catching more fish in different ways on different fisheries, but it was almost 16 to 1.
Wow. That's crazy.
What is that going to do if you're power fishing? You're multiplying your efforts times 16. What does that do to your catch rate?
Right.
It's pretty profound. So
yeah, it's interesting.
You can run the Torqeedo in a sense like a trolling motor on a lake as well, right? Like you can knock down the power to be really slow and combat wind just sitting in a lake as well.
Yeah. I do a lot of my fishing at 0.8 or 0.9 miles per hour. To give you a sense of if I have a really efficient hull that, it does well on. And we can talk about which hulls are more or less efficient later. But, at 1 mile an hour, I have a range of 130.7 miles on some of the better, longer 14-foot hulls.
Yeah.
So to give you an idea, if you're bass fishing, yeah, you may go at full speed to get to the spot and you're burning through that battery fairly quick, but then once you're there, you slow it down. But the longest day that I've had with it was actually striper fishing, and much of that day was just trolling, looking for, this was early season up on the Susquehanna Flats, all the way at the top of the Chesapeake Bay. A lot of trolling at about 3.2 miles per hour. I mean, hours and hours of trolling at 3.2 miles per hour, straddling a channel drop off with a Yozuri flash minnow on one side, a shallow diver, and deep diver on the left, and just out there with my head on a swivel looking for birds. You wait to see the birds dropping, or maybe you just get lucky and intercept them on that drop off. So hours and hours at like 3.2 miles per hour up to maybe 4. And then sometimes you see the birds and you bring in your lines that you're trolling and you haul ass and get to them. You go for a mile and a half, 2 miles because you see something happening, and you go at full speed. The longest day that I did doing that, I covered 25.3 miles.
Wow.
Still had 5% left in that 915 watt-hour battery. So, it's a mixed, you can burn through a 915 watt-hour battery in 2 hours of just running at full speed, but nobody fishes like that. So,
yeah, right.
It's a mix. It's a mix of, intense throttle use and then, somewhere in the middle, and a whole lot of, what would be about the speed of a really slow walk, where you can just continually cast and hit each little pocket, the same as a bass boater does with his trolling motor on low, just hitting each thing as they come to him on a bank or on a grass line or whatever they come to next. So.
Yeah. So have you helped in any kind of design work with any of the motors so far?
The motors, no. The mounts, absolutely. When it's been about 2.5 years that I've worked for Torqeedo, and I was one of the pro staffers before. And, we had the ball mount before, which about a year ago we came out with the A mount, which has that 4-bolt pattern, same as the power pole that you see on the stern of a lot of different boats. Mm-hmm. And we developed that mount really to fix some of the deficiencies and the instabilities of the ball mount, but also looking ahead saying, hey, we want to not just have this 1 horsepower, we want to be able to put that 3 horsepower motor on kayaks. And that's, that was just looking ahead 2.5 years to say, okay, that's what's next. But in order to do that, we have to shore up and have that mount, that base, super stable and super strong and rigid and able to handle, triple the power. So I went to Germany. The German, well, I'll back up and say I've worked with a lot of different American companies on prototype testing and product development, from Wilderness Systems to St. Croix Rods, Kokatat, Yak Attack, a lot of different companies that I've been able to provide feedback and get gear and test it. And when it's a prototype, your job as the prototype tester is to break it, to find ways to break it. I mean, not in abusive ways, but in hardest possible use. And with that mount, for instance, it has a reverse lock, and I said, all right, here's one way I know that people could possibly break it. I'm going to find a log that comes up to, within 6 or 8 inches of the surface. And run at that thing with the reverse lock line into the trim adjustment. You don't get to use that reverse lock the rest of the day. You just take it home, put that stainless steel rod in the vise, bend it back, stick it back. It's gonna go. But I had to do that to figure out what would break. I stuck that prototype for the A-mount. I can't even tell you. So what we're really working with is you have a range of height of the mount, where the mount sits in relation to how close it is to the water. And you had to figure out, well, what's the right length of pipe? And we actually changed it from the 403, the precursor that had the ball mount, to the 403A. We made it 10 centimeters longer. Why is it 10 centimeters? It's 10 centimeters because I tested it on pro anglers and big rigs and Wilde attacks and radars and Bonafide SS, new canoe pursuit. Like I ran the gamut. I have a lot of different kayaks, and I've worked with different kayak manufacturers saying, I need to get my hands on a feel-free lure. I need to get my hands on a Vibe Sea Ghost. I need to get my hands on all these different, Kaku kayak, whatever. I mean, I will put the motor on anything, but it was in developing that A-mount. There are tall sterned kayaks, and then there are ones that are very low to the water. The Bonafide SS 127 is one of those taller stern kayaks, needs a longer pipe. Wilderness Systems Attack 140 is one that's fairly squat, fairly low to the water, and you don't need as long of a pipe. So it was things like that to figure out what's the right pipe length, as an example. But there was other things like getting the motor lift right. And we get to do it all over again with the 3 horsepower, which is, everyone wants to say, oh, cool, I can just get the pylon for the 3 horsepower and slap it in my 1 horsepower mount. No, it'll rip it apart. The big motor will rip it apart.
Yeah.
So, it was another 14, 15 months. I think it was about a 15-month timeline from when I got the first 3 horsepower prototype to now. And it's not out yet, but it's next month.
Okay.
So the 3 horsepower is a lot of fun. Most boats are hitting 6.5. The one boat that is way out ahead of all the others in its efficiency and its speed is the Wilderness Systems Attack 140. It hits 7.1 with me in it, and I weigh 225 pounds. I've seen someone who's 155 pounds have my Attack 140 with that 3 horsepower Torqeedo Ultralight 1103 hit 7.8.
Wow.
So
that's pretty quick in a kayak. I'm just saying.
It is.
You're like, I
a
need
lot of fun.
I need racing gloves and then goggles now.
Yeah, goggles, roll cage, yeah, flame retardant suit. No.
Jeff's like, I didn't know we were going to start having people wear helmets at tournaments, but we need them.
Well, there are some safety considerations in there, and one of the things that they put in with this new mount is steering limiting pins. So as you with the 1 horsepower, you can get up to about 180, a little shy of 180 degrees of motor rotation.
Okay.
With the, I don't even know what the number is. I'm going to guess. Say that the 3 horsepower maybe only gives you 110 degrees of rotation. There's steering limiting pins there. That's so that you don't turn that motor at 90 degrees on a very narrow stern kayak, gun it, and log roll yourself into the water. They thought through that, and they've tested it. They tested it. I tested it. I've yet to throw myself out of a boat prototype testing I've tried. Not saying it can't happen, but that's why it has a magnetic kill switch that always is attached to your life jacket.
Did you get close?
Not really. I would say I've had I've been closer to flipping recently in the last year coming in from a surf launch than I have with the Torqeedo. I also have a background in whitewater paddling, so I'm pretty stable, and that really comes by having the training, taking whitewater classes. And I taught an ACA class for about 10 years that was paddling skills for kayak anglers. So
Makes sense.
if anyone is interested in learning some paddling skills, I will put it in a little plug for my YouTube channel. It's called The Little Stuff. In the first DVD I ever did, I did 4 DVDs. 3 of them are river smallmouth based, but one is called River Kayak Fishing Skills. If you look up, River Kayak Fishing Skills DVD, you'll find my page. Watch it. It's everything from river safety to logistics of running a float trip to doing a rock broach to learning how, intentionally flipping the boat so you learn that point of no return, to pattern development and forage assessment and maintaining boat position, all of these skills that help you become a better river angler. And a lot of them are paddling skills. And even if you're using a motor, none of that goes away. If you don't have a good brace, if you start, tipping over and you can't take your paddle flat against the surface on the side that you're falling down and mash down on it, punching down to bring your boat back up underneath your weight, you're not safe out there. So getting some whitewater paddling skills, I say whitewater, it's important for even someone who's out. Like I think of Matt Ball on that tournament up on Erie, and he flipped. He was just in really rough water, and it can happen to anyone, but it happens to people who have training less than those that don't have the training. So,
and I'll
taking a paddling course is important.
Yeah, I'll test the video that you're referring to because I remember when that came out, and I watched it and learned a lot, especially with paddling techniques and things of that nature. And it was amazing the amount of stamina that I would have left for a trip, like by changing how I was actually paddling. Like one of the things that really stuck out with me was where you were talking about when you insert your blade in the water and to give it like a split second, because when you sit there and crank, you're causing so much turbulence and you lose the efficiency of a single paddle stroke each time. And that stood out me big time, man. It made everything much more enjoyable. I mean, I had also upgraded to like a better paddle, like a lighter one, but that one single technique kind of changed how I felt like at the end of the day. Even I wasn't nearly as fatigued, and my back stopped hurting.
You're also more stealthy.
Yeah.
When you're not, when you go right into the power phase and you don't get a good clean seal on the backside of that paddle blade before coming back, it saps your energy throughout the duration of that stroke, but it's also making this churning noise that may not be in a natural location for the fish that are around to hear that kind of noise. Like, sure, if you're at the base of a rapid and you do that, well, it gets lost in the white noise of whitewater. But if you're in a lake somewhere and all of a sudden they hear whitewater out in the middle, they're like, that's not normal. So stealth. If you have good form, if you have a good catch and insert that blade cleanly, like you talked about, you're preserving your energy, you're making your own energy paddling last longer, but stealth is also part of it.
Yeah.
But a lot of stuff like that in there, in that DVD.
Yeah, it's a good video series. I was super stoked that you had released something because I'd been following you since. Oh, I want to say you used to do these YouTube videos, and I don't know if it was Kayak Bassing Magazine or something. Somebody else took it over after you stopped doing it. And I remember watching the videos of you with your kids, and it was back when
Yep.
you were talking about the dragon heads and that sort
Yep.
of thing. And I was like, and then when you started, and you kind of, I saw not you didn't disappear, but like I was having trouble like kind of finding out your information, like what you were releasing for a while, and then when you came out with the little stuff again, it was pretty refreshing, and it was cool to see you start because there's a lot of knowledge that you have. I remember talking to Nate, and Nate's one of the guys that you fished with that hooked into the mythical walleye on the Little Miami, and he was telling me how much he
Yep.
learned from paddling
Oh
with
my
you.
God. That was such a huge fish. That was a giant. That was the biggest walleye I've laid eyes on. Like it was like all of us were just like I know he was sapped for the day. I know he was just like, but the rest of us were too. Like Kurt Smits was like, 25 feet away, and I'm 10 feet on the other side, and both of us watched it happen, and we're just thinking, yeah, you got a big carp or a flathead, or and then we see it come up, and we see the mouth and the head on this walleye. We're like, oh my God, it was
And they're rare.
enormous.
They're kind of rare, like in that river. I mean, we have saw guy, but it's very kind of infrequent that you hear anybody catching like a true walleye around here, and especially one of size. So when I heard that
Well,
story,
for
I was cracking
listeners
up.
to know what I'm talking about, like he was drifting, he was standing up in his kayak, and we were all fishing the end of this pool, but like we have a good, pretty solid class 2 rapid behind us, and he's starting to get sucked down when he hooks into this fish, and he's fighting it, and he brings it close after a good fight, and he doesn't know what else to do because he's standing up. Like I don't think he had a net or anything, and he tries swinging it. He tries swinging it into the boat, not just
I did.
not
I
knowing
did.
what else to do.
I didn't
He
know
snaps
that.
his rod, and he drops down in the kayak, and the line snaps and the rod breaks all on one, and then and at the same time we see this cavernous mouth come up out of the water and just go, yeah, just say, excuse me, I'm the biggest walleye any of you will ever see, bye bye.
That's crazy.
It was an
That's
experience.
that's awesome. So like in regards to like mounting options, is Torqeedo like the supplier for the mounts, or is there other companies? Is there other things you recommend for that?
So when I went to to Germany to work with their engineers on designing it, their design process is totally different from how American companies do it. American companies, hey, let's take SurveyMonkey and pick everyone's brain and have a brainstorming session, just spitball ideas. Germans are not like that at all. They have a meeting and say, we're going to set the functions. It's going to do this and this and this and this. It will not do this or this or this. One of the things that I had lobbied hard for it to do, but it lost out when they started, saying, okay, it's going to tilt from this angle to this. It's going to have a stow function. It's going to, you know, and so forth. I didn't get it to be stackable where you have the mount and the power pole and then the Torqeedo.
Mm-hmm.
I lost that battle. Like logistically, it's a tough thing to do. And I knew
Right.
as soon as they said no, I said, okay, we're going to go forward with that, and we'll bring that to market. Meanwhile, the whole time I'm like, all right, who can I get to solve this problem in an aftermarket mount? First person I worked with was Daniel Reach with, it was Easy Mount, and now it's Primal. He came out with a power pole and Torqeedo, and also one that fixed some of the other issues that that the ball mount, until our mount came out, that the ball mount had in terms of getting the motor deep enough. Trey Leach was another one. He's a welder local to me. He actually makes rock guards for the ultralights. He's made one for the 1 horsepower. He's got one coming that I've prototype tested for the 3. In fact, I was at his shop today picking up an upgraded or the newer generation 2 of the rugged inline mount. So we put the power pole on there, and then we have the Torqeedo on the back, and I'm going to test it with the 3 horsepower. That's coming up probably day after tomorrow. But I'm taking that rig down to a dealer in Southwest West Virginia. It's
cool.
Steve Gunter. Gunter's Logo Works and Sports. He's on the Canoe.
Okay.
I've not been to a shop yet, but he and I are going to take the prototype 1103 and rig it on. He has a native Titan 13, and we're going to put foot control steering on it. I've done a Titan once with the 3 horsepower, and it was at Big Adventures at Native's headquarters, or Liquid Logic, their headquarters in North Carolina, and I rigged up it was a Titan 12. And I put a video up of that setup with foot control steering. I put that up on Torqeedo Kayak Fishing. That was one of the videos of it, like spinning around in circles and crossing its own wake and looking crazy on, they got a lot of videos or a lot of views on that video. But we're getting ready to do that with the native Titan, which is a nice one because you have, so say here's your footwell. You have the width here, where here in the middle you have your pedal drive, right? But you have the width in the sides with the Titan that you can steer with your feet, the foot control steering, and it doesn't interfere with what you have going with the pedal drive. Same thing with the Pro Angler. I've done the foot control steering on a Pro Angler, and then you have the room in the middle with the Mirage drive. You can also do that with a native Titan, and Steve and I are going to rig that up. But I'm bringing my Pro Angler with that power pole, that Innovative Sportsman power pole, and it's a rugged inline mount, power pole and Torqeedo mount in one, to kind of show that, and to show my foot control steering on that Hobie Pro Angler as, hey, this is what we want to end up with, but we're going to do it on the native. So
yeah,
and
very cool.
That's a lot of what I end up doing with Torqeedo. I mean, my job is, I'm a sales manager, but I have my hand in product development. I certainly have my hand in marketing it with all the different videos I do on Torqeedo Kayak Fishing. And I also run all of our trade shows. And I do not manage the Team Torqeedo anymore. That's actually Matt Balls, our Team Torqeedo manager now. But I can't do whatever I do with this to the degree of success I've had with the motor in the sales without Team Torqeedo, without guys like, and right before this, this call, it was Sean Boggs, hitting me up saying, hey, I got one more dealer for you to talk to here in Ohio. I'm like, cool, I will follow up with them tomorrow. So
nice.
It all kind of works together, and it's kind of a cool job that I do a little bit of everything. I don't, I'm not just a sales manager. I'm, marketing, product development, all of it.
Yeah.
So, which you can do that in a small company, which, Torqeedo is big worldwide, but here in the U.S., I think we're 16 employees. So,
wow,
maybe not as big as people would assume.
Yeah. So, you said that 1103 wasn't available, but it's coming out next month. That's correct, right?
Yep. So they're manufactured in Germany. Part of the product is a lithium battery, and part of the logistics of selling and distributing a lithium battery containing product is hazmat precautions.
Right.
Lithium can be a very dangerous material to work with. But we, in the shipping, you have to use a freight carrier, and they have to be hazmat certified, and there's a lot to it. But when they bring them over from Germany to the U.S., they float them over on a boat. They don't stick them on an airplane. You know how many times you asked about lithium batteries before you get on a plane to go somewhere. And the reason is if you have a lithium battery fire, they're really hard to put out.
And
that being said,
that stuff burns through like anything, doesn't it? Pretty much when it lights up.
Yeah, that's why they don't want it on a plane. But it's the one thing that Torqeedo, people ask, and you even asked at the beginning of it, well, the rare earth magnets and the GPS, those are all expensive parts of it. Well, the other expensive part of it is safe battery management systems. So the brains of a battery, where it has fuses that can sense, ooh, it's too hot, shut it off, or this set of lithium cells has more power in them than this one does. That's not safe. Shut it down and take it to service. All these things to make sure the waterproof case is actually one that, like, if there's a fire inside, it cannot burn its way out. There's like a ceramic component to that plastic case. It's not like rotomolded plastic that if you have a fire inside of a kayak hull, it just shrivels into. No, it's a pretty unique case. So the lithium battery safety is a big part of that. But yes, they're the first set of the 3 horsepower ultralight 1103s are supposed to be here the end of February. Those have already been sold and pre-sold and accounted for a month ago. And that's what I told everyone at the beginning. I said, they'll be here in early 2020, but not for you if you don't pre-order in November, December.
Right.
I tried to drive that home, but I think we're 70 motors into pre-selling them. So that's a good number.
Well, we were talking a little bit earlier, and you wanted to go over some winter smallmouth fishing tactics, that sort of thing. You care to elaborate and give? Because I'm gonna be all ears here. I'm not gonna really try to interrupt you. I'm gonna try to learn as much as I can. So don't mind me being a sponge.
Yeah. Going back to when I first started river smallmouth fishing in water that was low 40s, upper 30s, and now I've caught them down as cold as 32.6. Of course, people catch them through the ice, so whatever. That's a good thing to think of. If you're out there in flowing water in winter and you think, wow, this is hard and they'll never bite, you're already beat. You have to believe they will eat. That positive mental attitude is a huge part of it, and it can be difficult to maintain. And there's that first cold water fish, though, is a big hurdle to clear. Once you catch one in cold water and it happens and you're like, cool, I just experienced it, I just did it, you get that you give yourself permission to believe. Does that make sense? Like you give yourself that faith, and that faith is something that keeps you on point. If you can mentally be there, that in a way that you think, yes, they're there, they're right there, and I got this hair jig and I'm gonna put it right there and he's gonna eat it. And you believe it. If you believe it, and then you're on point. you're focused. And when it happens and you feel that, maybe you feel that little tick, maybe you don't. Maybe you just feel the line kind of get a little mushy. Whereas a second ago, you felt there's a bare jig head on a rock down there, and I can feel that solid static connection, or whatever it is. You just know, hey, something just feels different than it felt a second ago. I'm swinging on this.
Yeah.
But I started. I had help. I had someone who had been river smallmouth fishing. This is the early days of riversmallies.com. It was Brian Weirchalk who took me out on the main stem Shenandoah, and he said, you've never caught them in December? And I was like, no, I always stopped in, October, maybe early November. He's like, come on, we're going to go do this. And I had a really good first day of cold water river smallmouth fishing with Brian, because Brian gave me the gift of putting me in a place and saying, put your tube in that eddy right there, and you're not leaving this spot until you catch a fish. There are fish in there, Jeff. I know this river, and I know that's a spot there's always fish in there. And I think it took me 35, 40 minutes, but I caught a 19 out of there. It was the first, I think it was in 41 degree water.
Nice.
Which isn't crazy cold, but it was a start. It was a start for me. And, I went on a tear that day. That was the biggest I caught that day, but I got a lot of, 17 3/4 and mid 18-inch fish once I figured it out, and not just in that hole. And it sort of opened the floodgates of, oh my God, this is this is better than the other 3 months combined, because you have this understanding that it's sure, it's difficult, but when you do get that bump in and it's been 4 hours since you felt anything, there's nothing like a jig bite, but a jig bite in winter is so much better. Like, it's just a higher high to feel that rush of nothing's happened and all of a sudden pop, and you're just like, oh hell yeah. That feels really good.
Heck yeah.
In terms of what you're putting out there, I mean, what baits to use, you can bottom bounce with jig head and soft plastic. You can bottom bounce with jig head and hair. You can suspending jerkbait fish, which I'm really happy with a Lucky Craft pointer that does not suspend, but instead sinks at about this rate. Can you see my finger moving down?
Nice. Yeah.
That's the rate that you want it to sink. It's moving, but it's hard to tell that it's moving. That's the perfect suspending jerkbait, is the one that eventually gets to the bottom, and it'll sit on the bottom with that diving bill here and the rest of the body, including the treble hooks, kind of pivoting up. And that's how I've caught my biggest smallmouth in winter, with a Lucky Craft Pointer 100, with that diving bill just resting on the bottom. And the thing that I want to drive home about winter river smallmouth fishing is that it is not about enticing a bite. It is about setting a trap. So if they come up on it, especially big fish, if it's constantly moving, they'll look at it and be like, yeah, nothing's moving that fast.
Yeah.
Unless it's in a crazy warming trend and the river's rising and you had a warm rain and then everything is stirred up and they're eating. But that's a rarity in winter. More often than not, it's you're putting it somewhere and you're putting some scent on there, so it smells right to them. I like the Liquid Mayhem is good stuff. Yes, I give a thumbs up.
That stuff's awesome, man.
You put the stank on there and you put it in a place where you're confident there are fish, and you wait for it to happen. It's almost like bait fishing. It's almost like going back to farm pound largemouth fishing where you catch a couple bluegill and stick one on a hook out there and you wait for the bobber to go under.
Yeah.
That makes it seem less glamorous than winter river smallmouth fishing with hair jigs, but it's true. These fish are, especially in winter, they're scavengers much more than they're active predators. They're more likely to pick up dead stuff off the bottom than they are to chase something down and eat it.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So small soft plastics, I use a lot of Z-Man stuff. I use small stuff. Like I'm using what do they call them? The TRD bugs and the micro finesse jig. I did a really nice video in between Christmas and New Year's that like got crazy amount of views on I put it on Torqeedo kayak fishing, but it was on fishing that Z-Man micro finesse jig, which is basically the Ned rig head with a very small skirt, and then I use the TRD bugs on there.
Nice.
I've used the little TRD craws. I've used the streaks, which is like a fluke, but like I use the small one, the one you might use for drop shot fishing.
Yeah.
I think it's like 3 1/4 instead of 5. Small stuff. And you had mentioned earlier some of the videos I did for kayak bass fishing back in the day, that YouTube channel. Where I started using, and I started Confidence Baits, which is, we made the dragon heads and we made the little tubes and a bunch of other stuff. It was me and my buddy Roy, and I've backed away from that. I kind of sold my interest in Confidence Baits years ago, and but the little tube was a perfect example of going with a smaller profile, and the reason being, and I'm not saying they won't eat big stuff, but I feel like they nip at things. I don't know whether it's so cold that their jaws kind of stiff and they don't open up all the way to do their normal suction eating, where they open the mouth and they flare their gills and the thing goes in. What I observed that led me to make a 2 1/8 inch long tube, which catches fish, year round, but it was winter river smallmouth fishing that I developed it, is that we'd fish a regular 3 1/4 inch tube, which still isn't a big profile, and you'd get a bump and you'd set the hook and you would get the head of the tube, no tentacles, and here's the curve of the hook. Like he missed the hook by just a little bit. Like he grabbed the tentacles and was just holding on to it, and you can feel him moving, and you set the hook and it just ripped the tentacles off. So it was one of those moments where I'm out there, I'm like, I just, I need a tube that's smaller than, 3 1/4 inches. 3 1/4 inches is too big for him in winter. And, I started making my own, and, we dipped, I can't tell you how many tens of thousands of tubes, 16 of them at a time in these things that, we dip down into the plastisol and turn them up. And we had a machine that we would slide them in with stacked razor blades, where you would put your one hand here, and this big stacked razor blade things that come down and chunk and would cut the tube tentacles. Like, it was a guerrilla manufacturing type effort in our garage and basement to try and keep up with the demand of these handmade lures, which was just crazy. Like, it ate up a ridiculous amount of time for what we could charge for them. But small baits do the trick. Small, simple baits. If you're going to tie a hair jig, a really simple one, a really good one that always works, is a single 3-inch strip of rabbit zonker. Just the rabbit strip, the rabbit hide, just you know, 3 inches long. As you can cut a razor blade, you can go buy them, you know. I like to take this knife and slice them so that it's a little bit more sparse. And on you put in the board, it's going to lift like the Z soft plastic is going to list. That's a very easier jig that anyone can tie. You dress the neck with a chenille that's brown, and you know, you use that chenille as a reservoir for the scent through motion hair has, but you can you know, smush that you know, the scent in that chenille and it'll stank. I will throw spinner baits. I've actually caught them on crankbaits in winter. It's rare. You have to know when to fish, when to slow roll a spinner bait, or to really slowly grind a crankbait. I mean, as slow as you can keep it moving, but it's still just chipping the bottom. And that's that rare day where you have a freakishly warm front come through and you have some warm rain that comes in, the kind of day where you have a warm front that comes in and it puts down some rain and it warms up and raises the river. That's when you can in winter back away from your let it sit presentation. You're setting the trap instead of enticing the bite. If the river is rising and if it was a warm rain that is making it rise in winter or late winter, early spring, that's when you want to come off of the let it sit presentation and move to the, all right, we're going to have something moving, but we're going to move it as slow as we possibly can and just strain water, you know. Yeah. In terms of finding those winter holes, there's a really good video on my YouTube channel of, I think it's called what does a good look like? But the video is by Winter. It was a process by which you from December and again and again, and where in August you see, you know, fish evenly spread throughout, and then September it's more concentrated where nothing, and then fish, and then nothing, fish, and then fish, nothing, fish. You see the concentration in certain areas where they draw into these winter holes. That's how you learn where winter holes are. You know, there's so much to be learned in late October, early November of where winter holes are, because by then they've made a pretty good run, you know, and started to get close to those areas, but they still want to eat. They're still going to chase down a rattle trap. They're still going to hit a spinner bait on a current seam. But they're near where they're going to be in December, January, February, March. So there is a process, and when you find a good winter hole, you know, it's a valuable thing. You've put your time in to find it, and you know, maybe you don't share that with everyone. You share it with someone who maybe is going to go float a different section and share and tell you, hey, I found them over here. We're going to do my float this weekend. Next weekend we'll do yours. That's what you hope for in you know, in a good fishing buddy, is someone who's not only going to expand your knowledge of where some good spots are, but you know, you're helping them and they're helping you. So
yeah.
Very cool.
Well, man, I appreciate you coming on tonight. I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up there.
Okay.
Is there anything else you'd like to add before we end this podcast?
Sure. You know, it's certainly a fun time in kayak fishing. I have one of the funnest jobs in the market in working for Torqeedo. I travel a ton. I travel a whole lot. This coming year, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the different KBF and BASS, and there's another one that is it's called Slay Nation, which isn't just kayaks, but it's, you guys know what it is. It's John boats, canoes, and kayaks, but it's electric only. So I'm going to go to those tournaments and then some saltwater tournaments, and I will be there. My goal is to get to the big tournaments where there's going to be, big concentrations of kayak anglers at tournaments that allow motors. And I'm going to show up, to a day ahead of time or maybe 2 days ahead of time during that period of time where people are pre-fishing to say, hey, I'm here. I'm going to be at this launch for the next 2 days. Please swing by. I will have a Hobie Pro Angler 14, a Bonafide SS 127, a new Canoe Pursuit, and a Wilderness Systems Attack 140. And we can, I'll have that 3 horsepower motor on all of them at some point. But the idea is that I'm going to get there and I'm going to be a traveling demo day. So cool. If you're interested in seeing what it feels like to go 7 mile an hour in a kayak, find me. I will probably be at a tournament near you in the next, upcoming year. I'm also going to be at the demo days of some of our dealers, like Appomattox. I think I'm doing Mountain Man up in New York State. There's some other ones. So, very cool. There'll be opportunities, but definitely if you're interested in trying a Torqeedo, definitely, be watching Torqeedo kayak fishing on Facebook, and hopefully, I can meet you and let you test one of my boats.
Very cool, man. Are you going to be at the national championship?
Absolutely. Every year I'm there. Yeah.
I'm going to track you down.
That'll be one of the ones where I'll have a couple days of hey, come find me, and I'll be at this launch, and you guys can test them out.
Very cool. Awesome.
Well, Jeff, I do appreciate you, man, taking the time to come on the episode. Like I said, Jeff did this really quickly. I know how busy you are. We've all, everybody who follows kayak, bass fishing just a little bit has seen plenty of Jeff Little videos, especially with your, it's really cool because it's been fun watching you go from shop to shop to shop too, because you're not just like taking your boat and you're like, oh, here it is. You're like, hey, give me a kayak. Let's put this thing on here. Here's how we installed it. This is the speed we got, and you're giving everybody, you're answering those questions everybody's got in their heads. And they're just like, right. I won't know this until I actually put one on. And it's just, it's refreshing to see that you guys aren't scared to, get that information out here. And they're like, it gives you the idea, like, how's that going to perform on a big rig? What's it going to do on, the Bonafide? Like, what's its speed, Yeah. And it's cool seeing all the different boats, and, it's been quite interesting to watch your journey so far on that. So I congratulate you on, man. You got this dream that all these guys in these plastic boats right now are like, oh, I really want to do this for a living. And Jeff's like, thank you. Now come demo, guys. So it's awesome though. But we do really appreciate you coming out here, man.
Absolutely.
Right. It is a lot of work, and it's a lot of fun at the same time. So Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely, man.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and wrap it up. If you guys have any questions for Jeff, we'll make sure that we tag him in the show post, and, you can direct any questions, obviously, through him, through social media. If you have any questions for us in regards to the interview or anything like that, always feel free to reach out on our social media platforms. Brian, you got anything else to add tonight?
That's it, my man.
All right. Well, Brian, why don't you take us out with your usual outro?
Well, I was going to say that, but I was like, with the Torqeedo, it's not like tight lines and smooth pattern like usual. Like it should be tight lines and smooth torquing or something like that, I like it. Tight lines and smooth torquing.
There we go.
That works.
All right. Well, everybody have a great night. Thank you.
Absolutely.
See you guys.
Go check out the website, guys, paddle, the letter N and fin.com. Also check out YouTube, youtube.com/paddle and fin. If you got a question, comment, want to hear from a future guest, feel free to email us at paddle, the letter N and fin @gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media. We're doing giveaways, announcements, things like that at Facebook and Instagram at paddle and fin. Shout out to our show supporters, Rocktown Adventures, Loveland Canoe and Kayak, Hammered Lures, Fish Mob Lures, TRC Covers, Ketch Products. Go to ketchproducts.com. You can put the paddle and fin logo right on your catch board. Don't forget to go over and pick up your JigMasters Jigs. Use promo code PNF20 and save 20% today. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast on whatever platform you're listening to. It helps grow the audience, helps others find our podcast. So please drop a 5-star rating in on the podcast platform you're listening on. Don't forget about the recycled plastics program, you guys. Take your used plastic baits, put them in an envelope, mail them to the address in the show notes. Our man Eric Richards at Hammered Lures melts those down, makes new baits, and donates them to various chapters of Heroes on the Water.